So the postural function of the superficial back line is to support body in full upright extension, prevent the curl over into flexion. This superficial back line requires a higher portion of slow twitch fibers for the endurance. Also requires extra heavy sheaths and bands of fascial portion, as in the Achilles tendon, hamstrings, sacrotuberous ligament, and thoracolumbar fascia, the cables of the rectus spinae, and at the occipital ridge. The movement function of the superficial back line is to create extension and hyperextension. The superficial back line starts from the plantar surface of the toe phalanges, up through the plantar fascia and short toe flexors, through the calcaneus, then the gastrocnemius/Achilles tendon, and then hooks up to the condyles of the femur, and then to the hamstrings, to the ischial tuberosity, to the sacrotuberous ligament, to the sacrum, sacrocolumbar fascia or rectus spinae, up to the occipital ridge, and epicranial fascia, to the frontal bone, to the supraorbital ridge, and that makes up the superficial back line. The superficial front line, its postural function is to balance the superficial back line. The muscles of the SFL stand ready to defend the soft and sensitive parts that adorn the front surface of the human body. That's why in the movement function the SFL is to create flexion of the trunk and hips, extension at the knee, and dorsiflexion of the foot. This SFL contains a higher portion of fast twitch muscles, fibers, and that's why it protects sensitive parts quickly. The dorsal surface of the toe phalanges is where the myofascial line begins, up to the short and long toe extensors of the tibialis anterior and anterior crural compartment, up to the tibial tuberosity, to the subpatellar tendon, and to the patella, up to the rectus femoris / the quadricep muscles, to the anterior inferior iliac spine, up to the pubic tubercle, through the rectus abdominis, up to the fifth rib, and to the sternalis / sternocondral fascia, the sternal manubrium, and then through the sternocleidomastoid, up to the mastoid process and the scalp fascia. And that is what makes up the superficial front line. This is the lateral line. The postural function of the lateral line is posturally to balance front and back, and bilateral to balance left and right. Mediates force among the other superficial lines. The LL fixes the trunk and legs in coordinated manner. The movement function is creating a lateral bend in the body. The lines are made first starting the first and fifth metatarsal bases, through the peroneal muscles and lateral crural compartment, to the fibular head, anterior ligament of the head of fibula, through the lateral tibial condyle, the iliotibial tract and / abductor muscles, through the TFL, to the glute maximus, to the iliac crest, ASIS and PSIS, where then goes the lateral abdominal obliques, to the ribs, then to the external internal intercostals, the first and second ribs, and splenus capitis / sternocleidomastoid, up to the occipital ridge and mastoid process. So this is a spiral line. Its postural function is to maintain balance across all planes and helps determine efficient knee tracking and walking. Also, dysfunction in the spiral line will affect easy functioning of these other lines. Movement function of the spiral line is to create and mediate spirals and rotations in the body, and in eccentric and isometric contractions to steady the trunk and leg to keep it from folding into rotational collapse. The spiral line is made up, where it starts actually is in the occipital ridge / mastoid process, to the splenus capitis, to the lower cervical / upper thoracic SPs, to the rhomboids major and minor, to the medial border of the scapula, to the serratus anterior, to the lateral ribs, to the external oblique and abdominal aponeuros, and linea alba. The internal oblique to the iliac crest or ASIS, to the TFL and IT band, and to the lateral tibial condyle, then to the tibialis anterior, to the first metatarsal base, to the peroneus longus, to the fibular head, back to the bicep femoris, to the ischial tuberosity, to the sacrotuberous ligament, to the sacrum, and the sacrolumbar fascia and erector spinae, back to the occipital ridge. Now we move on to the functional lines. Mostly for posture, these muscles are used for day-to-day activity, so they don't usually stiffen or fascially shorten to maintain posture and minimal. To maintain posture is minimal. The functional lines movement function is to give extra power and precision to the movements of the limbs. So for this picture, this is the front line, which generally uses the AOS system, which is the anterior oblique system, which uses the adductors and contralateral external oblique to work together to form that function across, bringing your shoulder closer to your one shoulder closer to the opposite hip. So here we have the back line for the functional line, and this one is mostly comprised of the posture oblique subsystem, so the POS, because the latissimus dorsi works with the contralateral thoracolumbar fascia to the glute max, which brings also that shoulder back to the opposite side to the opposite hip, which makes up this back functional line. So for my example of all these myofascial lines working together, I used the motion of a football throw. So as you pull back, your body uses the SBL to pull back plus the spiral line to rotate back, to pull your torso and rotate it. Also using the lateral line to stabilize your body as your weight transferring from your back foot to your front foot. As your weight transfers to your foot, the SFL becomes engaged to help pull the body forward to generate forward force. This is where the functional lines come into play. During the motion to bring the ball back, the BFL uses the glute max and the contralateral lat to pull the body back and rotate it, and then uses the functional front line to use the internal oblique and contralateral adductors to make that forward throwing motion. And as we go, again, we'll look at the video again in a faster speed. So now you can see how all these myofascial lines and those functional lines work together to make this throwing motion possible. I think the football throw is a really good throw to show how all these lines work and coordinate together to form a function in one movement. And yeah, this is the football throw.